There's a post that's being shared on social media about the Dunkirk movie. As you probably know, Tom Hardy's character, Farrier, or Fortis 1, forgetting that saying about discretion, sacrifices himself and ends up landing on the beach near Dunkirk. All of the characters in the movie are, of course, fictional, and yeah, it's a movie, not a documentary. However, Operation Dynamo really happened, and inspiration, one would hope, at some point, came from real events. The post going round is drawing comparisons between Al Deer and Hardy's portrayal of Farrier. Okay, I'm happy with the fact that Deer ended up on a French beach with a nasty gash on his head. Well, not happy about that, but I agree it happened is what I mean. But that's where the comparison ends. I mean, Deer, as far as I know, didn't have a spit that defied the rules of gravity and was packed with more bullets than a suburban American home. Nor did he set his crate on fire and then get collared by the Jerrys. And I'm sure if he did, there wouldn't be a broomstick in it. At some point, someone hasn't sat down and really thought about all this, have they? My question is there actually a better real-life candidate for what happened to Farrier in the movie? This is what the primary sources tell us. Between the 21st of May and the 2nd of June 1940, 61 Spitfires were lost over France or while returning from combat, 44 of them during the 8-day campaign to cover the evacuations near Dunkirk. Of these, 15 pilots would land in France due to combat damage. Of those, 10 landed on a beach, and just 5 of these being forced landings opposed to belly landings. Of the 15 Spitfire pilots in this group, 3 set fire to their aircraft, but none of them was subsequently captured. In short, none of the 61 Spitfire pilots who found themselves in difficulty over France in those 13 days did so in quite the same situation as Fortis 1. So, who are the closest real-life matches to the movie? Well, if we set the criteria as a Spitfire pilot who landed wheels down, maybe on a beach, and was subsequently taken prisoner, but not before he had set fire to his crate, this is what I've discovered. So 3 pilots were taken prisoner after a forced landing on French soil, but none of them were captured after landing on a beach. The 2 men who were captured after belly landing on La Plage came down near Calais, not Dunkirk. So all of these pilots are out of the equation. This leaves us with 3 men, all of whom made it back to Blighty, unlike Fortis 1, but have amazing escape stories that are very close to the events of the film. But before we talk about those men, let's concentrate on Fortis 2 for a second. As you may know, this is the dozy pilot who decided to ditch in the sea in a spit rather than risk jumping. Not a wise decision, we all know about that scoop. Well, perhaps he knew that his aircraft was actually made of wood rather than metal. Are there any men among R61 who Fortis 2 might have been based on? Well, I'm glad you asked. 3 Spitfire pilots were successfully rescued from the sea during or just before Operation Dynamo, which is a feat in itself given the abysmal air-sea rescue set up in those days. On the 25th of May, a day before the operation officially began, Pilot Officer Allen of 54 Squadron bowed out into the channel, somewhere near Gravelines, and was reported safe. During his combat that afternoon, he fired on a 109 and set its engine on fire. His Spitfire was then hit by cannon shells and his engine started to burn. He took to the parachute, sensible chap, by rolling on his back and was in the sea just 10 minutes before being picked up by a destroyer. On the 1st of June, 2 Spitfire pilots were saved from a terrible fate in the English Channel. Flying Officer Bell of 616 Squadron was flying in the same formation as Pilot Officer Morant, who will come up later. He was shot down and ditched in the sea off Dunkirk and was rescued by the minesweeper HMS Halcyon, which did a great job during the operation. So we're getting closer to the movie portrayal, destroyer to minesweeper. Can we do better? On the same day, another member of that wing, but this time in 19 Squadron, also went down into the sea. Flying in Red Section, Sergeant J. Potter engaged an ME-110 and got in a good 8-second burst, closing to 150 yards. However, he was then attacked and lost sight of its quarry. Disengaging, he dived towards the English coast with 12 pounds of boost engaged. Catching up with his flight, his oil cooler exploded and his engine started to run very rough. Still over the sea, he spied a small boat and decided to ditch in the apparently fairly calm sea. Planning to keep his parachute as a life preserver, it became caught in the sinking aircraft and dragged him under with it. Somehow, releasing himself in the parachute, he broke the surface and saw he was just 60 yards from the boat. Unfortunately, it was a French fishing boat called the Jolie Mascotte, and the crew of 4, who were not Anglophiles, were on their way back to Dunkirk. These Frenchmen were a little perdu, and Potter was able to steer them in the right direction. On approaching Dunkirk, Potter was taken aboard a destroyer, but not before the original one he boarded, called the Basilisk, had been sunk by German bombers. There's a weird connection there for you Harry Potter fans. But what of the men who could have been the real-life Fortis 1? On the 26th of May, No. 65 Squadron conducted an offensive patrol between Calais and Dunkirk between 0818 hours and 1009 hours. The sky was reportedly full of aircraft at different altitudes from 10,000 feet. They first encountered some 30 HS-126s attacking Calais before running into 109s and 110s. Pilot Officer K.G. Hart was hit in the starboard wing while still over Calais and nursed the Spitfire down for a forced landing on a beach near Dunkirk. Over the RT, he told the CO that his aircraft was a complete wreck and he himself was wounded. Nevertheless, he intended to set fire to the Spitfire as soon as he was down. Reportedly, French fighters were directed to go to his assistance. Hart made it back to England, so this is where the similarity with Fortis 1 ends. On the morning of the next day, 74 Squadron were up in force patrolling Calais-Dunkirk. They sighted aircraft at all heights up to 15,000 feet. Encountering ME-109s and apparently at least one Dornier 17, Red 1 ordered them to break and attack in pairs. During the fight, Pilot Officer PCF Stevenson was hit in the radiator by a Dornier 17. He belly landed his crippled Spitfire on the sands near Dunkirk. Surviving the crash landing, he too managed to set his aircraft on fire before escaping across the channel. The last closest representation of what happened to Fortis 1 in the movie Dunkirk happened 4 days later, on the 1st of June. Early that morning, numbers 222, 616, 19 and 41 Squadron formed a wing flying out of Hornchurch. They patrolled over the north coast of France. There was low cloud over the coast and the formation caught some 109s and 110s flying through it at about 5,000 feet. They attacked and claimed 5 enemy aircraft for the loss of 7 aircraft, 2 pilots being killed and 1 captured. One of the luckiest Spitfire pilots to be shot down that day was Pilot Officer R.A.L. Morant from 222 Squadron. He landed at Bredouin near Dunkirk, and after safely leaving the cockpit, he also set his Spit on fire. He was also able to make it back to Blighty even at this late stage during the evacuation from Dunkirk. So there you have it. Although Deere was certainly in the right place at the right time, his experiences are much less like those of Fortis 1 played by Tom Hardy. I suggest that Pilot Officers Hart, Stevenson and Morant are much better candidates, and perhaps the first and last being the best. Despite the fact that these brave men managed to get back to England and help defend it in the air, unlike Farrier, I don't think we could hold that against them. To the best of my knowledge, Hart and Morant survived the war. Sadly, PCF Stevenson, by then a flight lieutenant and flying with 64 Squadron, was killed in his Spitfire Mark 9. He was on Circus 262 to Hardelot, which was attacked by JG-26. Suffering engine trouble, Stevenson ditched off Boulogne and was never recovered. His name appears on the Runnymede Memorial. So what do you think? Let's imagine that any research was put into the creation of the characters in the movie. Which of these names do you think that some dog's body may have read about? So if this video entertained you even a little bit, then please consider joining our mission to bring this channel up to 75,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All you've got to do is click on that subscribe button and the notification bell. It's nice, simple, free and easy, and the best way to help me make videos like this one in the future. Okay, see you in one of those very soon.